think what gets me up and gets me to create the videos and help my clients and just a general community as well is because I think there's a lack of truth in the property market. I mean, if you just step back even away from the property market, there's a lack of truth in this world, generally speaking. And of course, we all have an agenda, but at least to the extent that I can, to the extent that my intelligence allows, I try to just bring truth into the property market by sharing data. Such a big question. The qualities, characteristics, and traits that separate high-performing investors, sustainable investors from the others.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all,
welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show for Australians who want to learn how to unlock their full self, health, and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders, and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom, and to live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life that you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. Are you concerned that we're heading into recession? Do you worry that the property market's going to crash? And are you finding yourself getting caught up in the FOMO of chasing properties in favour of the year affordable hotspots like Perth or other areas? If you are, then you're one of a growing, stampeding herd that's doing exactly the same. But I have growing and increasing concerns that a lot of property buyers are going to get their fingers burnt with all of this. So what's going on, what's changed, and why is this happening? Because I've seen a significant shift in property buyer activity over the last few years, and I've been trying to make sense out of it. Why are more and more buyers flocking to locations like ants around a piece of meat in a FOMO-fueled feeding frenzy as they compete with each other to buy properties and, as a result, artificially and temporarily push up prices in what becomes a bit of a short-term self-fulfilling prophecy? Because I'm concerned there's going to be a costly sting in the tail to all this. Let me explain. As a closet contrarian, I'm a bit of a disciple of the old Warren Buffett school of investing, where we need to be fearful when others are being greedy and greedy when others are being fearful. And at the moment, I'm fearful about the growing trend of concentrated hotspot activity, where investors are hunting in hyena packs fueled by buyers' agents, and once the carcass of a location has been picked bare and prices have risen sharply, they move on en masse to other short-term feeding grounds, and the hotspots quickly become not spots, with the potential for property prices to soften and then go sideways for extensive periods of time. Now, this is exactly what we've seen in parts of Tasmania in recent years, where property prices burn brightly for a period of time and then the lights have gone out. And Western Australia and parts of South Australia and other areas are showing signs of doing exactly the same. So what's turning up the volume of these piranha school property parties? I think it's all lying at the intersection of a number of trend changes that revolve around a perfect storm that's been created by the coincidence of data, social media, affordability, supply, and borderless buyers agents. Let me break this down and explain a bit further. Firstly, in the space of under 20 years, we've seen a big shift from virtually no property information to too many accessible metrics, where we've all got instant, ready access to volumes of desktop data. Secondly, the rapid rise of always-on social media platforms means that the AI algorithms selectively concentrate our information diets as property marketers chase us around, and we keep seeing them just about everywhere. Thirdly, reducing affordability and falling purchase price power from interest rate rises, inflation, and lending policy restrictions favour locations and property types that are more affordable and concentrate buyers into a narrow purchase price range. Fourthly, the resulting hotspot areas are experiencing listing supply levels, or the number of properties for sale, that are 20 to 40% below the long-term average, so more buyers are competing for less properties, like seagulls fighting over hot chips. Fifthly, COVID has accelerated nationwide digital access to more virtual property details, along with our increasing comfort with buying properties remotely that are sight unseen, which has resulted in a quick shift in buyer behaviour from local backyard to borderless nationwide, with investors now far more comfortable buying properties anywhere across the country. And finally, the rapid growth in the number of buyer's agents, accompanied by the increasing comfort of hardworking, time-poor investors in using them. Now, buyer's agents only get paid when they sell your property, so there's subtle pressure from them for you to buy a property sooner rather than later. And as a result, they're more likely to be looking for an excuse to say yes to a property rather than looking for reasons to say no. And the combination of all of these influences is, from my point of view, creating a bit of a caustic cocktail that's likely to burn many investors down the track. So I have growing concerns that a cluster of high-profile buyer's agents that attract big audiences are becoming market makers. Much like big institutional investors in shares and equities markets will have the ability to drive prices up and down as a result of the power of their trading volumes. Similarly, high-profile buyer's agents are using their big social media footprints, along with SEO, to actively chase and ensnare aspiring investors right around the internet. And because they're all relying on the same desktop data, they're shoehorning investors into locations and using FOMO, fear of missing out, to sell investors low-quality, overpriced properties with limited long-term performance potential. Consequently, these piranha feeding frenzies have been developing in locations where all of these buyer's agents are concentrating investors, and they end up flogging them untested off-market properties where the buyer's agents become little more than mailbox extensions of selling agents to offload overpriced, low-quality properties, with the result that these self-proclaimed and self-fulfilling prophecies of short-term rapid price growth result until the buyer's agents desert the location en masse and direct the flock elsewhere. So I'm concerned that investors that are caught in this buyer's agent-created FOMO and market-moving activity are likely to see property values soften for extended periods of time once the BAs have actually shifted their locational focus, meaning it'll be too late once the investors realise how poor their properties are performing in a few years' time, and by then, the buyer's agents will be long gone. So here's a warning. If you're being chased around social media and keep seeing the same high-profile buyer's agents pushing the same locations, be very wary of these wolves in sheep's clothing, as they're more likely to be funding their own profits at your long-term expense. Now, I'm not tarring all buyer's agents with the same brush here, because there are a number of very good buyer's agents out there who add significant value to property purchases, particularly for time-poor and inexperienced investors. And I've actually seen these firsthand. But they're getting lost in the sea of high-profile charlatans and snake oil salesmen that are dominating the airwaves, who sound convincing and tell a great story based on truisms, but what they end up pressuring you to buy doesn't pass the sniff test. And if it sounds too good to be true, it generally is. So the bigger a buyer's agency is and the faster that they've grown, and the more that you're seeing them, the more you need to be concerned, as these are massive flashing red light warning signs and you need to run away and avoid them as quickly as you can. It's why, sadly, our know-how business has been forced to provide you with a unique John Western property approach, where it's the properties we reject that make sure you get the best, as we sit on your side of the table and vet areas and properties that are being suggested by buyer's agents by running a second-level detailed due diligence over them to ensure that a property is truly the best fit for your specific strategy needs. So make sure you follow the old rule that if you're hearing about a state, location or area just about everywhere across the media, then it's already too late. And stop following the impatient herd and start swimming against the tide of popular property opinion. In my humble opinion, you need to shift from being what I call a momentum investor that follows the flock and gets caught up in this short-term FOMO to become a contrarian investor that fishes in quieter pools away from the buyer's agent market makers in locations, property types and price points where the fundamental long-term property growth drivers will outperform. So today I'm keen to discuss this market-making theory along with a number of hot topics on what's happening in property and what you should and shouldn't be doing by enjoying another great conversation with one of our Get Invested favourites, the one and only PK Gupta. PK first joined us back on episodes 268 and 269 when we were swamped with positive feedback. So if you haven't listened to them, make sure you do by clicking the link in the show notes. And if you don't know him, PK is a fellow property investment educator and facilitator that leverages his proven expertise as an active investor who's built a portfolio of residential and commercial property as well as development projects that give him a six-figure passive income. And PK and I share the same mission to educate you on building passive income through property investing done properly. Through his Oz Property Mastery podcast, his YouTube videos, and his Property Investment Accelerator course, PK helps you to learn strategies and gain market insights backed by his data-led system and his experience. He gives you essential tactics to help you buy the top 5% growth and high cash flow properties and grow your portfolio without wasting months doing research, spending all of your weekends at inspections, or spending thousands on buyer's agents. And we're both on the same page in relation to helping you to remove financial stress so that you can do more of the things that you love with the people you love. So I'm really excited to be deep diving in all things property again. So welcome back and let's get invested again, PK.
Hey, thanks so much, Bushy. I always find our chats to be very laid back, and it's really nice to learn from you as well during our conversations.
Well, I think we learn from each other, PK. What I love about it is we're both open. We're not fixed in our mindsets. We don't think there's only one way. As you and I know, property conditions are always changing, and the dynamics is constantly on the move, which creates a lot of opportunity. But your ability to communicate and share real information, untainted by the need to be selling something, is almost unique in the current marketplace. And it is why I tend to gravitate to listening to what you've got to share, and it aligns very closely with my own thoughts on the exercise as well. But look, before we sort of get into some of those hot topics that are near and dear to both of our hearts, can I take a bit of a step back and get you to update us on what's been happening in your world, starting with refreshing us on what you do differently and why you do what you do, please, PK?
Yeah, sure. I think that was a really good introduction, by the way. Thank you. Why I do what I do has changed, I think, a little bit over the years. Initially, when I started teaching others, I simply started because my family and friends started asking me, hey, you seem to have some semblance of success, whether that's true or not back then. Can you just give us a bit of a hand? And, then it's like a snowball effect. And luckily enough, they got some results. I was just doing it for free, right? And then I was like, oh yeah, this could be some sort of mutually beneficial thing where I can help people. And then it sort of scaled very, very, very quickly. Fast forward, what is it, like 7 or 8 years. I think the reason I do this at the moment, and this is not for me to get on my high horse and be like holier than thou or anything like that, but I think what gets me up and gets me to create the videos and help my clients and just a general community as well is because I think there's a lack of truth in the property market. I mean, if you just step back even away from the property market, there's a lack of truth in this world, generally speaking. We were just talking before, it's like you don't know what's going on, who's right or wrong with various elections. You don't know who's right or wrong with different wars. You don't know who's right or wrong with all sorts of things because everyone's got a different agenda. And of course, we all have an agenda, but at least to the extent that I can, to the extent that my intelligence allows, I try to just bring truth into the property market by sharing data, hopefully minimally my opinions or stripping away my opinions and just sharing data and considered commentary on it. And I think that's it's a little bit something different because data is plentiful these days. Like you said before, data is democratized, which is a good thing, but you can manipulate data to say anything you want, especially if you're a business owner, especially in the lucrative, unregulated world that is Australian property. So, what I really enjoy saying to my clients back in 2020 or 2021, oh, let's start investing in these parts of Perth. But then I really also enjoy saying in late 2023 or early 2024 that, guys, I think, I don't think Perth is, going to drop by 50%, but I think it might be a little bit overcooked. And don't take me, my opinion for it, but here's a whole bunch of data that suggests things are a bit different. And I'm not saying, stop growing all of a sudden or anything like that, but perhaps not the best place to invest. And that kind of flies in the face of probably, to your introduction, what 99.9% of industry professionals say. And I really get a kick out of being a contrarian. I'm not a closet contrarian. I think you introduce yourself as a closet contrarian. I'm pretty out there. And so, you make a lot of frenemies that way. And no, I enjoy it. I enjoy getting a kick out of being right. And, sometimes I'm wrong and that's fine as well. But I enjoy being a bit of a maverick in this space.
I love it. And I guess that's probably why we connect so well, because like you, 3 or 4 years ago, we were encouraging investors to get involved in areas in WA. We stopped that at end of last year. I just felt that it's getting to the dangerous level for the same reasons, looking at the same sort of data, which I think is potentially going to create the issues. But the bit of a lone voice in the exercise when there's so much media noise about it. And that when I see so much media noise, it's always a massive warning sign for me. So I love you sharing that. On yourself, PK, what do people misunderstand about you the most, do you think?
I think there's a really easy way to pigeonhole or categorize someone who sells a course as being full of a toxic agenda and out there to do anything and everything to try to sell an online digital product, because that person's getting rich every time someone buys it, and they're not really doing it in the interests of the public or the interest of their clients. Of course, this is not everyone thinks this, but in the wild world of social media and the internet, it's easy to think this, easy to be carried away by other people who are mentioning things like this. And of course, sometimes it's difficult to give people the benefit of the doubt if people have been stung by charlatans in the past and they've been stung by online courses which have a bit of a stigma, let alone being in the real estate market, which itself has a huge stigma. So I think that's a little bit misunderstood. I think, from a course perspective, I don't say this in a braggadocious way, but I say this in a very proud, like a humble, proud way, that I have the most social proof in Australia out of anyone, bar none. All right, on various platforms, everyone tagged. I don't want to go into it, but from a client's perspective, if you have a community of 100,000 plus people, you can't fake it for too long. You know what I mean? Maybe a year or two you can fake it, but someone's going to catch you out. You can't be deleting negative comments or like people say, oh, Google reviews you can't be deleting Google reviews in the hundreds, right? At the scale. So I think that's really misunderstood. And the other thing is, although once again, this seems like I'm on my high horse, I really enjoy helping people for free as well. Probably every single 2 days or 3 days, I get a message from folks who are like, PK, I bought in such and such location. The thing has gone up by whatever it is, like 20, 30, 40% in X amount of time. Thank you for your free content. I don't know if you'll appreciate this message or not, but just wanted to drop a line. And they didn't do my course. I didn't make a buck out of them. I didn't make anything out of them. But just to be able to message me shows their character and how grateful they are. And it really, brings a smile to my face, because it's like, you're helping people for free. Some people go down that route. Some people get good results out of that. Some people not so much. But regardless, you've helped. And other people's you help for a payment. So look, I think that's probably something that's misunderstood. I really enjoy helping my community of more than 100,000 people. You can tell I have the most free content. I don't want to be competing against anyone, but probably the most free content out of anyone in real estate in Australia. And of course, that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, I love you sharing that. I haven't picked up any of what you said about what you do. Perhaps I'm not looking for it either. But what you can't argue with is results, and they're obvious. But also the intent, PK. I think if the intent and the values are well directed, then there's always going to be people who are unhappy, not because of what you're educating them on, but because what they do or don't do with it. And then we're living in a society in Australia now, sadly, where we're very quick to point the finger and blame something or someone else for things that we haven't done ourselves. I tend to ignore most of that because there is some personal accountability that comes to play in all of that. But certainly, I know from my own personal perspective, I love the information you share. It's all really well qualified. You grab our interest, and then you give us good reasoning behind why you're suggesting certain things. I keep doing it because, your success speaks for itself in that regard. But I guess changing track just a little bit, what, if anything, do you struggle with, PK?
What do I struggle with? I think it's difficult to catch people's attention and hold people's attention if you're not, making things flashy. And most of my content is around data. It's littered with graphs and charts and tables. Like across my YouTube videos, I think I would have shared more than 3,000 charts and more than 1,500 videos. So it's hard to capture the attention and bring into the property fold folks that aren't that way inclined. And, not everyone is into numbers, not everyone's into data. And some people could be, because it's pretty simple, but they just have this mental block. And so I think that's what I struggle with. And a lot of those people, I call them, maybe it's a cynical term, but I call them like prey. A lot of those newbie property investors, wannabe property investors, are the ones who click those Facebook ads from other folks and buy the off-the-plan apartment or house and land package, a million kilometers away from the city or whatever. And it's hard for me to reach them. And I think, I ultimately, they come into the fold after their second, third property, because then they're like, oh, this current method's not working. I got to actually go beyond my comfort zone and really understand true evidence-based property investing. But for the first two, they've kind of messed it up. And so that's what I struggle with is, I don't like to use the word convincing, because, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You'll never convince someone against their will. But it's hard for me to convince someone who's not into data of how to do things the right way.
Well, I think the key, and I've taken me a long time to learn this lesson as well, PK, but people will only listen when they're ready. And in the old days, I was almost evangelical about property because of what I'd experienced with what it had done for me. And I was out there to try and convince everything about the benefits. And I came to realize that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And there's still a lot of people who are looking for instant, quick fix results and get rich quick successes in property. And you and I both know that they don't exist. So it's not until someone's got a blood nose quite often that they're ready to listen, and they're starting to recognise that chasing the shiny new thing isn't going to give them the results they're looking for, and they're ready to get back to fundamentals and let the data do the talking. So no, love that. Something else I'd like you to perhaps discuss is if you can share an aspect of your approach that you're finding a lot of people in the industry don't agree with you about.
This is an easy one. And we talked about this, of course, last time as well. It's really funny. I think a lot of buyer's agents over the many years that I've been doing this have now finally come over the fence and said, actually, you don't need a buyer's agent to buy top echelon properties, because nowadays everyone has access to data, and everyone can buy interstate without having to fly there. I'm not saying you're not seeing the property or doing your due diligence, but you don't need to fly there. You use building and pest inspectors, property managers. We've talked about that many times before. So a lot of buyer's agents and industry professionals have now clued on. In fact, many buyer's agents that are national agents basically follow my formula to the T for their own businesses, for better or worse. But I think a lot of people still disagree with the concept that you don't need a professional to buy top performing properties. And look, we can go into all the reasons why you don't, and how property investing is more like gardening than being an electrician. You still got to go to Bunnings and get a few tools, but anyone can do their own gardening as long as they're interested. Whereas for an electrician, that's a different type of professional. And certainly buyer's agents don't need a multi-year degrees or diplomas or TAFE courses or anything like that. So it's not in the same category as a surgeon, electrician, etc. So I firmly believe, like I've always said, if you enjoy doing your gardening, if you're a DIY type of person, anyone can get the same results, but I think most times better than even a professional, because no one cares about your money as much as you do. As you said at the start, Bushy, it's really easy to swallow a dud deal from a buyer's agent because you put them on a pedestal, and of course they're going to give you the right deal, right, without understanding their incentive structure. But when you're buying it by yourself for yourself with the right mentoring, you're not gonna just accept anything, and because you're really educated. So I think this is still something that's misunderstood, but less so than before. And I think results, and not to toot my own horn, but you just can't disagree, or you can't just deny thousands of results over many years.
100%. It's that old saying: if you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach them to fish, they can feed themselves forever. What it comes down to is really our level of interest and our level of commitment, because if we invest in our education as the first and foremost priority, so that we have the head knowledge to be able to test and try, of course we're going to get better sustainable results. But if you're deflecting that accountability and responsibility and putting it onto someone else because you're too lazy or you're not going to make the time, then you get the results you deserve, really, from that perspective. So
and I think people are cluing onto this as well. There's a point that you made before, Bushy, that folks are validating their BA deals through your insight and your mentorship. And I think people are now more clued on to the fact that buyer's agents have a cost overhead, they have offices, they have staff to pay, they have big marketing budgets, they need to get through 30, 40, some of them 30, 40 clients a month just to break even. And so therefore there's a tendency to churn and burn. So a lot of them, a lot of people do my course, even though they don't have time, just to be able to validate or verify what the buyer's agent's telling them. And whether they're going through a buyer's agent or not, just like with yourself, I get, I don't know if it's weird, but I get a real kick out of saying, I don't think this is the right property, right? It's like, because I have no incentive. I don't make money based on them buying or not buying. So, and kudos to those members as well. They are very appreciative, grateful, and they appreciate when you say no to a property as much as when you say yes and give them the go ahead.
Well, and it's the education of why you're saying no and why you're saying yes. It's
exactly.
The element of our business that's grown very strongly in the last few years is not because I want to. I don't want to grow that part of the business, quite frankly, but there's a need there now, because I'm seeing so many investors getting burnt by buying very substandard properties based on a post-justified story by a buyer's agent or someone else, that I felt the need to step in and start saying, hey guys, let's have a proper look at this. And our role is always to work our way out of a job, PK. I don't need to be doing this. It really breaks my heart when I see people falling for some of the trickery that we're doing. I'm only doing this as long as we have to. And I think with the work that you're doing to educate investors, we'll get to a point where we don't need that second layer of due diligence, because people will have the knowledge themselves to be able to make much better informed decisions, rather than handing the blame to someone else and then suckering the result as a consequence of that. Now, I guess just before we dive into the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about today, just to sort of set the scene from your perspective, and I know we've touched on this before, but what do you think of the qualities, character traits and actions that separate sustainably successful investors from the rest?
Such a big question. The qualities, characteristics, and traits that separate high-performing investors, sustainable investors from the others.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, I'll get to a mindset in a second, but the first thing from a technical perspective is cash flow, right? Everyone wants growth. Growth is the engine. We all know that. Yeah, cash flow, great. You make maybe $3,000 or $4,000 per property. Let's say positive cash flow. Nobody's leaving their 9 to 5 anytime soon based on that, right? You really got to get that growth and have a exit strategy based on either retiring debt, selling down some properties, or being more active and developing, or granny flats, or whatever the case may be. So I think the first thing I'll say is being mindful of cash flow. And I've really gone out on a limb to try to educate folks that even if your household income is 400K, 300K, 500K, even more, still focus on yield. Because if you're going to buy 2% yield properties, 3% in Sydney, let's say, then sure, you can afford to, because, you're bringing in the money on a yearly basis, monthly basis, but the bank is going to penalize you from a borrowing capacity perspective. And so what do you want? You want the largest possible quality portfolio value possible, because it's off that future growth occurs. So actually, cash flow is a key feed from a borrowing capacity perspective into getting as large a portfolio as possible from a lending perspective, off which then even more growth can occur. So it's kind of a subtle point, but sometimes obvious, sometimes not obvious. So cash flow, buying high yield deals. Like I have one e-commerce client, she makes like 500K a year, and she's still buying sub 700K properties, 6+% yield. And that's because also, who knows, your business may stop at some point, you may become unemployed. And so you never want to have to sell that property. So from a technical answer, I would say cash flow. And from a mindset answer, I think people who are in it for the long haul. I never say that you can pay off your mortgage in 2 years from property investing. I never say that you can leave your 9 to 5 in 5 years, 7 years, sometimes not even in 10 years, 15 years from property investing. I know this is something you're big on. I remember we talked about it last time. Property investing is a lifestyle. You need to create, that lifestyle design, but you also need to make property investing a lifestyle choice. That doesn't mean that it's a part-time job. That doesn't mean that you need to set aside a couple of hours every week, just to check on your portfolio. I don't do that myself. But it's a mindset. It's like every time you hear the news, you gotta, okay, let's go a bit deeper. Let's understand what Bushy's saying about it. Let's understand the data just to maintain our blood pressure and healthy levels. Every time, property values go down in your suburb, which will happen over a course of 10, 15 years. It's like, all right, but let's just always remember the end game. So I think, anyone who's extreme in either giving advice or receiving advice are generally the ones who can't stick it out for the long haul. Balance is not sexy, and it doesn't get me much views or clicks on my videos sometimes, but balance prevails in the long term.
Beautiful points. I think that the key things that I'm picking up on there, firstly, intelligence doesn't equate with success when it comes to investing, because I've seen some very intelligent people earning massive incomes who allow their ego and pride to get in the way of smart investment decisions. Coming back to your point, buying the flashy house with a very minimal yield because it looks good and they can talk about it at the dinner party, but in terms of de-risking their future lifestyle, they're making things worse, and they're putting themselves on a treadmill that what means they're probably going to have to work for a lot longer before they're in a position where they don't have to work anymore. So I think that's a key element in that exercise. And I think the other thing that goes with what you were sharing around that is that I guess the mindset equation of focusing on what doesn't change versus spending all your time worrying about what is changing, because there are some real fundamentals in investment that they're pretty much ephemeral. They just don't change. And if you focus on those and stick to those and ignore the noise, so like you, the biggest risk is looking at your portfolio too often because you'll make knee-jerk reactive decisions based on fear by doing that, rather than backing yourself and making sure that if all the fundamentals are right and then taking that long-term view, you're going to do okay. So some great shares on that. Freedom Fighters, I'm just going to jump in here and break my great discussion with PK as we both talk so freely about all things property that time just seems to fly. So what was going to be a single episode chat, I've now decided to break into 2 very valuable episodes. So make sure you tune in for next week's unmissable concluding part, where PK and I dive into the details of property market makers and movers and what you need to be doing to avoid the mistakes of the growing horde of momentum investors that are competing with each other in short-term hotspots as a result of the instant expert buyer's agent property Pied Pipers, so that you're better prepared to protect yourself and know what you need to do, where and how to secure sustainable, long-term, outperforming properties that will fuel your version of freedom. So stay tuned. Remember to always get invested in your knowledge and your network. And PK and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. Make sure you subscribe to Property Hub for free. Get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's top online property show for red-hot property investing news and insights direct from industry leaders and influencers. And finally, I'll see you next time.